In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives. Of America.
What's up?
Tim Binnall. Thank you.
How are we doing?
I'm doing well. I want to thank you so much for filling in for the Jeffrey.
Oh, don't worry about it. We're doing the show now, right?
Maybe I shouldn't have thanked you so quickly. Yes, Tim, we're doing the show now.
I can never tell what's going on around here. I want to just first assure all of the great Paratopia listeners that with me as the first guest co-host, we can only go up from here. It can only improve. So the great guest co-hosting experiment is off to a rousing start and destination upward now. So that's good.
It's always good to put a disclaimer about yourself out there because...
Well, all the people that are like, oh, fuck, man, you starting with Binnall? It's good, though, because then, like I said, it's only going to get, it's only going to keep getting better after this.
Well, the thing is, anyone you put on, everyone's going to be like, oh, it's not Jeff, it's not the same.
Well, yeah, that's true. It's like Laverne without Shirley.
I like to think of it as Squiggy without Lenny.
There you go.
Hello.
Well, I really appreciate the Paratopia tote bag that I got as a guest co-host with an autographed copy of I Know Why the Aliens Don't Land and a Paratopia t-shirt and extra space for me to steal office supplies. Mm-hmm. I'm cleaning this place out.
The candied fruit is in the mail.
Candied fruit?
You ever have that?
Oh, No, I'm imagining like that hard candy you get. It's like strawberry
it's like a
flavor.
basket full of fake fruit with like sugar on it. It's like sugar within sugar, and none of it tastes good somehow.
Oh, I think I've seen that stuff. Yeah, it's like a jelly almost.
Yeah, I think I just dated myself because maybe they don't even make that anymore. Yeah,
it's a little old school, but hey, thank you for having me on as the first guest co-host. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and, what have you been up to?
Not much, to tell you the truth. Working a lot, off-site work, and kind of getting a little burned out this late into Season 5 without a break, so I'm actually going to be taking a break soon, so I'm almost kind of like in vacation mode.
Oh, do you need me to host your show while you're gone? I don't mean
it's like musical chairs
or anything.
Well, I'm going to keep doing the Lost Cast with you, so at least we'll have that going on. But we'll break the news to everyone now that we probably won't have a guest on the Lost Cast this week because, as I said, I'm already sort of in vacation mode, so I'm chasing people down for now. But we'll have a lot to discuss anyway. So,
for people who don't know, Tim and I are doing a what I like to call the Losturbation show. It's a Lost podcast that we do to go, oh my God, what do you think's going on now during the final season of Lost?
Yes, and it usually pretty much devolves down into, what do you think's going on with this? I don't know. I don't know either.
So if you want to hear us say, I don't know, for like a half hour, head on over to Binnall of America.
But yeah, other than that, nothing really. I'm planning on putting out one more episode here this coming week with Ken Thomas, and then I'm going to relax for a couple weeks, and then I'm going to start taping new interviews and come back at the end of March. So we usually take a hiatus in the middle of the season, so it's right on time, and I'm just burned out. It was a crazy month of January, and now February's just gone by very fast.
Anything new in the world of ufology that's worth talking about?
No. I haven't heard anything new or exciting. I will say that
I found exciting is the Weber Sala debacle. Because we were making fun of Michael Sala quite a bit on the show because he had presented a photo of an alleged alien that was clearly a middle-aged or older-aged white man in shorts and a t-shirt on vacation somewhere. Like literally, it was like a photo of your uncle.
What made it an alien?
This could be an alien. I don't know. What made it an alien was supposedly he was 10 feet tall because he was standing in front of a small tree. I mean, that was it. It was like he could be 10 feet tall. Or this could be a small tree from Home Depot. Definitely one of the two. Oh, my God. So this is Michael Sala, who is now saying that Alfred Weber has gone overboard with his, I don't know, whatever his take is on what's going on Mars. Funny thing about that is Alfred Weber, as I have famously pointed out over and over again, believes that the World Trade Center towers were taken down with reverse-engineered alien beam technology by our government. So apparently, he's been saying that for, the last 8-9 years, and that's fine. That's not going overboard. But whatever his take on Mars is, apparently, is one step too far for disclosure. So there's been a mutiny on the Bounty, sort of led by Michael Sala to oust Alfred Weber. Not according to Sala. He's sort of trying to back off and saying, I never said that, but frankly, who cares? It's just fun to watch.
Yeah. And I'm surprised it took this long for this sort of, infighting to happen in the exopolitical field. So, it's been a long time coming, I guess, because, I was going to mention that we're coming up on, actually, it's been 5 years since the first X conference, so this will be like the 6th year. And I'm disappointed that they've moved it to right in the city of Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. Very disappointed. I would have actually attended, but I don't want to go and stay in the city. It's going to be expensive. I kind of liked it in the quaint little hotel outside of D.C. You've been to that one, right?
Yeah, well, they can't pay their bill is the problem.
That's your... I don't know that for a fact. I don't know what
the fact. Steve Bassett sent out an email to everyone saying, we can't pay the bill. This is what the hotel says we owe them. He was basically saying what I would argue is that we've given them so much money indirectly through, people being there to pay for dinner and, use those hotel rooms and whatnot, that we don't actually owe them this cash. But unfortunately, the law being what it is, I'm assuming he signed a contract that says he does in fact owe them.
Well, I really liked it there, and now I feel like, to use an overused cliche, I'd feel like my childhood was being raped if I went to the X conference at a different location now. I'd be like, because those were sort of like the quaint early days of Binnall before I even got mixed up in all this when I was just a attendee.
When you were just a tadpole Binnall?
Yeah, when I barely, when I didn't know who was who and who was how.
So when you were back in your formative stages of Binnalldom, and you went to something like that, were you taken in by people automatically who you now think, oh, I wish I hadn't been taken in by them, or did you have sort of a common sense wits about you?
I had a pretty common sense wits about me because I knew going into it. I had been sort of interested in the field for like 1.5 to 2 years, so I already knew that people were either a lot of people were kind of crazy or fucking smarmy. There's a certain smarminess too that's sort of like
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah. It's sort of like the people that can name like the starting lineup of the '69 Mets. Same type of people, but with UFOs and stuff.
Right.
Where it's like, God, I don't even know. They know like some random witness from Roswell or something, and they start bringing crap up that my eyes just gloss over. So I tried to avoid both of those style of people, just because, I don't need to be talked down to by someone who's like super obsessive about this stuff.
Who did you go with?
All by myself.
Wow.
Well, it's not that big a deal. It's just a trip to D.C.
Yeah, but it's a big deal.
I'm not 8 years old.
Yeah, but it's a big deal to go to D.C. to a UFO conference for the first time by yourself, I think.
Yeah, that's true, but I didn't want to travel all the way out to California, which is like a night, I went to the one in Vegas a few years ago, and aside from the flight, it was great. But it was just like, that's a long-ass flight to Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And, that it was in D.C. was like the main reason I went. And I think we talked about this last time I was on your show, and they had all these stars and shit the first year, where it was like Jim Mars, Rich Dolan, Linda Moulton Howe, Hoagland, like everybody you would want to see live. Because back then it was like, for me back then, these were like celebrities and shit. They weren't like people that I have on my show or anything like that. Mm-hmm. These were like people I've heard on the radio a million times, and it was sort of like the equivalent of going to like a Woodstock or a Lollapalooza or something, where it's like I can see all these different bands in one weekend. It's kind of like that.
Was it packed?
It was pretty packed, yeah.
You see, this
it was a good turnout.
When I went, the couple of times I went, it seemed to be pretty packed, and so I don't understand how they're losing so much money. I mean, he always says like attendance was low, but then when I'm there, it seems pretty much sold out for most of it. So
yeah, but it costs a lot to put people up in hotels and shit, speakers and stuff. When you're putting on a conference, like, even if you don't pay them that much to speak, you still have to get them there and still have to put them up in a hotel, and that costs like in the hundreds of dollars. And then for a whole weekend event like that, you probably had to bring in like at least a dozen people. Mm-hmm. So, if it's like $700 for each person to bring them in and everything and put them up.
Yeah, that's true.
You're talking like, I don't know, a lot of money. You're talking like at least $1,000 for like 7 people, just for all their, way more than that. I probably completely botched the math, but.
Now, have you decided whether or not you're going to have Bassett on your show?
I've considered it. I thought about it. I probably will eventually. But it's just like, I'm kind of just disappointed with the way everything's gone with that whole branch of the field. And I've just gotten more and more cynical. When I started out, I was really on board with the whole exopolitics thing, which is sort of like, kind of makes my whole turn of face or whatever, all the more sad, I guess, in a way, for me. So it's just like, I started out where I was like, these guys are on the right track, we got to get political about this, blah, blah, blah. And then, the more I learned about it, I was like, shit, they're not getting any closer. This has been going on forever. They keep telling me that it's inevitable, but nothing ever happens. And now I'm talking to all these other people that are telling me.
Who in that movement would you recommend, though? Because, I mean, when I look at the cavalcade of people coming out of there, none of them seem credible to me. And now, I guess maybe Greer presented himself credibly when he first came on the scene or something. I wasn't around then, so I don't know. But, now he's a buffoon, and I can't imagine Michael Salla was ever anything but a buffoon. So who, and then Weber is the other one who's just opens his mouth and you hear mental illness. So, at least I do. So who would you recommend? Who would you look to say, yeah, that's going to be the guiding light of this movement?
Of exopolitics?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe Leslie Keane. She's like barely involved in exopolitics, I think, but she's sort of doing it on a more.
She decided to not involve any of them in her thing. I mean, yeah. I would say, I'd say you're right, but I mean, just in the thing that initially attracted you to exopolitics, who did you look at and say, yep, that's good stuff?
Probably, I guess, Bassett, maybe. I'm trying to remember now. It's hard to remember that far back. But maybe him, and then before I really started listening to Weber, all I knew was that he was like mixed up in the Carter administration and stuff. So that sort of carried some weight until I started to hear some of the crazy stuff he was saying. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
well, this I think is what we're going to hear. This
guy was with the Carter administration, so it's pretty cool that they have this guy. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute, he's just another UFO guy.
I think this is what we're going to sort of get at with Wester in our interview, which we have pre-taped. So. Make no illusions about that.
I was going to pretend like... I was just going to say, I'm really looking forward to talking to him.
Well, I was going to do that, and then until I realized I wanted to make this point, is that, which already happened, is that he talks about exopolitics, that there are certain people in Bulgaria, or a person in Bulgaria, who's sort of famous there, but he believes is trying to make a name for himself by saying crazy things to get international attention, to become a darling of the exopolitical movement. And it strikes me that that's probably what all these guys do. I mean, Weber included, it's probably like what you hear that credential, and that's completely attractive. So you give him a spotlight, and you give him a microphone, and you let him write books, and then slowly but surely it dawns on you, oh, right, I'm listening to complete crap.
Yeah, well, you kind of can follow along that with the guy from Canada there that came out, and they jumped on him for a while, and then Fife Symington.
So here's my question for you about that. Is that oops, I did it again, or is that by design? Is that the way that this business works? Do they really want disclosure, or do they just want the business of wanting disclosure?
That's an interesting question, because in a sense, disclosure is like self-defeating for them. Because if they got disclosure, then they'd fucking be left with nothing to do. So it's like, if anything, you should be working against disclosure so you can keep having your conferences and stuff.
Well, doesn't it seem like they are working against disclosure when you look at their conferences?
Well, I do wonder about that. I think that, I don't know what the hell's going on with that whole scene. It seems like it's sort of, it has the best intentions, but then it's sort of like, I feel like it's misguided in a way, where it's like, the government doesn't really, A, probably doesn't really know what the fuck's going on, and B, they don't care to let you know. Right. So it's just not happening. The only way it's really going to ever break in an organic sort of way that isn't done on behalf of the aliens is like if they crash somewhere, like in Detroit or something.
Well, if you have Bassett on your show, the only question, I can't justify having him on the show to ask this, but the one question I would have for him, and I think the only question is, who are your sources? Who are your mysterious sources that are giving you these dates? Because I've seen him in enough interviews now where he says, Obama's going to disclose, and I base this on media and other sources. And he makes it sound like he has sources. And he said this at his conference, where he made it sound as though he had some sort of inside source. Who?
He won't tell you who his sources are, though.
But there is none, I think the answer. Like, who in their right mind is going to Steve Bassett and saying, yeah, I've got the real deal here? I mean, what person who knows anything goes to Steve Bassett, goes to Greer, goes to Sala, goes to any of these guys with real information? Who does that? I mean, what would be the benefit?
Yeah, but you have to look at it from the perspective, too, that, like, you can fool all the people some of the time type of thing. If they got all these people showing up at their conference and everything, there's some people that are on board, even if they're in the government. I'm sort of taking the devil's advocate that this guy does have sources. I mean, he could just be making it up. So, I mean, that's one possibility.
Clearly they can't be good sources if the disclosure hasn't happened that he promised would already. Like, so at that point, I mean, at what point would... How about this? If you had a secret source who was giving you bogus information, how long would you give him before you would out him?
I don't know if I'd necessarily out him. I'd probably just sort of stop caring or believing in what he said.
But you're the one whose ass is on the line. You're the one who's...
Oh, like I already said a bunch of shit that he told me, theoretically?
Yeah. Oh. Wouldn't you eventually be like, screw this, I'm not protecting this guy anymore. He's hanging me out to dry.
Probably like after like the third time it happened. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah. But see, it would happen is the point. Like, wouldn't it? I mean, that's like a normal human reaction would be to say, screw you. You screwed me for the last time. But these guys never do. Why? I submit to you because there are no inside sources.
It's reasonable to conclude that. I'm not going to argue with you about it. I don't really, haven't really thought about it much. I just kind of think, like, if they can dupe enough people, then there must be people inside that probably are on board with this whole disclosure thing and think that they're think that they're doing something by telling these guys this stuff. Mm-hmm. That sounded like it didn't make any sense, but so I'm bewildered by the whole thing because I just don't think that disclosure is going to happen. And we've watched this unfold now for like 5 years, at least this whole like exopolitical branch now, and they've tried all this different stuff and nothing's worked. So I'll be interested to see how it develops. Now there's infighting, mm-hmm. which is a whole new twist to this thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if we go another 5 years and this thing is just completely imploded.
Oh, I guess the other thing that happened around the same time now is that Greer finally released a photograph of an alien. Did you see this?
Was it a guy in Bermuda shorts?
No. This was even...
We have dueling photos now?
Well, we have dueling laziness for photos, because one guy is a guy in Bermuda shorts in the daytime, and the other one is a tree in the nighttime.
Oh.
I mean, it's literally, you're looking at a piece of shrubbery But he's got analysis of it and all this stuff, and you just look at it and you go, wow, is this competition for crazy with Michael Salla? I mean, there's no even guesswork that of what you're looking at.
To tie this in then to kind of what I was just saying, then maybe now we're seeing, maybe it's been like 5 years since they seriously committed to being a movement, pretty much, 5 or 6 years, and they haven't really advanced this thing any further than they did when they first started, despite a million facts movement and God knows how much pressure on the government. And so now maybe they're turning towards desperate measures. So now, their back's against the wall to start producing stuff, because they haven't. And first we saw the claims of disclosure that were going to happen, and now we're seeing these photographs, and it's like maybe they're just starting to freak out a little bit. Not outward, not like they're saying it or whatever, but psychologically they're like, we haven't delivered on anything, so they're desperate for evidence or whatever, so they'll take whatever they can get, type of thing, to try and stave off the the eventuality that people are going to start turning in opinions like ours.
Well, I think that is what's happening. What I find odd about that in Greer's case is that he had sort of backed off for a while and was just talking about free energy devices. So he could have just kept on that merry little path and stayed away from the CSETI stuff, but he went right back to it. Now he's locked into that bullshit again, so...
Yeah, but aliens and UFOs are like 1,000 times sexier than free energy.
Especially when he's talking about them.
So, and like I said, if we're seeing the cracks starting to form now in the movement, it's like they're under all this pressure. They haven't delivered yet. Now there's starting to be this finger pointing, and I wouldn't be surprised if these factions and things start developing even worse. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I can only hope, because at least they're calling each other out for a change instead of us having to do it.
Yeah.
But to what end, who knows?
Crap. Well, I just can't wait for them to dissolve, for the whole thing to implode, and then see what comes next. Because to my way of thinking, this is an extension of the contactee movement. I can't even imagine what would be next.
I think you'll see more of a Bill Cooper-esque twist to what's left of that faction or fandom, if you will. Mm-hmm. I think that it'll turn into a heavy emphasis on the cover-up, and they'll just sort of become cover-up researcher types with more extreme sort of stories and stuff, kind of like what we're seeing with these pictures, but, more of that. Mm. So I think it'll turn into that, because they're not going to all of a sudden turn into, nuts and bolts UFO investigators.
Right.
So they either leave the field, or they become, ardent pushers. They're already ardent pushers of a government cover-up aspect of it. Mm-hmm. In their minds, it's a fact. So, I mean, yes, the government's covered up some aspects of the UFO phenomenon, but we really don't know the width and the breadth of this cover-up at all.
Right.
They could just be covering up the fact that they figured out how to make anti-gravity or something.
Yeah.
Or that there could be no aliens at all. There could be no ETs whatsoever. But if you talk to some of these people, it's like, that's a fucking fact, man. Which is the frustrating part, which is sort of like why when you ask me if I would have Steve on the show again, it's like, I'll pretty much interview anybody for the most part, as long as they're not, spewing hatred and shit. Mm-hmm. But it's just sort of frustrating, because I feel like I deeply disagree with some of the fundamental aspects of the exopolitical movement, and I don't know how well that conversation would go. Mm-hmm. Because I'm kind of easygoing. I don't like to get all conflicty,
right,
to channel my inner Sarah Palin. But so I try to avoid the conflict. But that I'm afraid that it would break down into that kind of thing if I was just don't you think you're doing a disservice to everybody by making these outrageous claims without any sort of backup, and then saying there's going to be disclosure? And mm-hmm. I mean, the only good thing they've done is really just get a lot of press coverage, which I guess is good, but at the end of the day, people see the press coverage and it never lasts or never goes anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, we've been getting press coverage for years, dude, so we're not getting any further on this.
Yeah.
We need to just change the whole paradigm, but if anything, ufology would probably go into some kind of fucking slump like a complete dark ages, if it's not already in there. Mm-hmm. And out of that will emerge, hopefully, like a new ufology that's more theoretical. Mm-hmm. At some point, the ETH thing just completely took over the UFO thing. It was like at some point they said they figured it out. It's like, no, you never did. You never figured it out, dude. So stop saying that it's ETH. It's a possibility, but it's not any more a possibility than a half dozen other things it could be.
Well, let me
can't just throw the other ones out.
Leave you with this, and then we'll get to Wester. There's a TV producer and I think film, but he's mostly done, I think, music videos and various shows, directed and produced. His name's Dan Halperin, and he is trying to slap together a pilot episode of basically my idea, which was like just to hook up an abductee's home with a bunch of cameras and have it be a reality series. Someone had suggested me or put me along with a bunch of other people in this mailing list. I haven't responded. I'll just throw it out there. Do you think I should? Paratopia? I mean, the only reason that I even would think about it is the reason that I wouldn't think about it, which is that at least one person, the most vocal person on this emailing list, and I won't embarrass her by saying her name, but she's, I don't think she's an abductee. I think she is a New Age Fruit Loop. I think she will do anything to be on TV, as she makes very clear in her email exchanges. And so part of me is like, I don't want to be associated with that. And then the other part of me is like, well, but if anyone's going to bring some goddamn truth to this, maybe you have a job to try, you know? But then it's reality TV, so probably I'll get edited to just look like funny fat guy or something, you know? Or, you know, obviously I would be doing my stupid Tai Chi stuff or energy stuff, right? If this camera's in my home, so I'll probably just end up looking like a bozo in the end anyway, so I probably shouldn't throw my name into that ring, should I? So, I don't know, come to the message board, let me know what you think. I at least know that it's a real production company and a real director-producer. It's not some fly-by-night
some weirdo who wants to put cameras in your house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
I would not do it, dude. I would definitely not do it.
Yeah, I don't think I would either.
There's just too much margin for error and margin for...
Yeah, I think I'd have to be in the editing room, you know?
Right,
like, I don't
and
think
you won't be.
You know,
they won't, like... You know, they'll take the cameras down and be like, see you later, we'll email you when it's on TV.
Yeah.
And then you fucking watch it, and you're like...
I'm Stan Romanek.
You know, and then you have, like, weirdo experts, like, analyzing your midnight snack behavior and shit. You know, and they're like, what do you think it says about Jeremy that he got up at 2 in the morning and had that bowl of cereal? And you're like, oh, this is not what I was hoping for at all.
I miss my father.
Is there anything else we should talk about?
Nope, that's it. Wes Owsley. Please welcome back to the show our very special guest, Wester Owsley. Wester, thank you for coming back.
My pleasure.
So, last time you were on the program, we talked about the problems of there being a super secret space program, and you'd mentioned that you were going to start investigating Bulgaria, this Bulgarian UFO flap. So we definitely want to learn about that, but first, it's funny, I've been watching a lot of NASA stuff on the National Geographic Channel, and we talked about it a little bit privately. I think it's, the Omega mission that they wanted to do in 2020 that I think Obama probably cut at this point. But it seemed like a huge rigmarole of, first, this booster, you know, to get back to the moon, you've got 2 rockets, and one of them has to lose a couple of boosters, and solar panels have to extend, and then the other rocket fires, and then they have to somehow hook up over the atmosphere of the moon, and it seems like a big suicide mission to me. And I was watching this and I was thinking, boy, if ever there were a time to just come out and say we have super secret space technology, that would be the time. So, I don't know. The more you see of these sorts of things and the way that NASA's going, the directions that they would like to take the space program, does it look to you more or less like there could be a secret space program?
Well, it would be a lot easier to hop in the UFO, wouldn't it? Well, first of all, when we spoke, you sort of threw me. It's actually the Orion project.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That you were talking about. The Omega project is a real project, but it has something to do with the Earth, ocean, and algae, and developing fuel from algae or something like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the Orion project. Well, if it happens now because of the budget cuts that have unfortunately may cost a lot of people the jobs here in the state where I'm at. Because this is the northern part of my state is sort of the production facility for that launch vehicle. The thing about the Orion project is that there was a huge emphasis on crew survivability in the case of an emergency. And so hence you have sort of stage after stage of built-in, just in case problems happen, we can still save the crew. And so... yeah, it does seem complicated.
Well, it seems like stage after stage of things that can go wrong to me. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. Things that probably would you're building in more problems. And so, to me, it just proves my point that exactly what you just said. If there was ever a time to pull the stuff out of the closet, this is now. And it's not happening.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I'm not a big proponent of the secret space program, but I entertain the notion. I guess that's the best way to put it. And I would presume that the people... now, you probably would know if I'm wrong about this, so please correct me. But I would presume that, like, the people at NASA who are actually in charge, like the engineers and stuff, of getting to the moon and stuff, they probably would have no idea about any sort of secret technology that probably would be possessed by some other part of the government, like, the military or somewhere else.
Well, Tim, the thing is that I would agree. I agree with you, but the problem with that is, and it's the point I've been trying to make for a while, is that getting a vehicle of any type into space is a mammoth effort. Yeah. And there are measurable resources that are used in order to do that. And the problem I've always had with the idea of there being this secret space program, and I guess we should caveat with, we're not talking about satellites here. Yes, there are secret satellites in orbit we don't know anything about. Sure, they exist.
Yeah, we mean like secret government UFOs.
Right, exactly. And, the problem is that those have to be built. And the government has known sources for the materials needed to build those. And sort of you can trace, it's easily traceable, it's public information, where those chemicals and materials and mineral resources go. And it's not to, Area 51. It's just not happening. So, you're absolutely right. If the United States military had something, NASA wouldn't know about it. But I would presume with one of the things that a lot of people don't know, I think, is that the United States actually operates what's called a constellation of telescopes, which are throughout the world, and they monitor, let's say, low Earth orbit and see what's going on. And I've actually had the privilege of seeing some of the results of those optics, and I can tell you that you see in TV and on movies, you always see the satellite that can read a nickel or something like that, read a newspaper over a guy's shoulder. Yeah. But to me, the stuff that looks up is much more interesting. I have seen these satellites zero in and read the serial number off of a part on a satellite.
Whoa.
So I would think that if the United States military were flying stuff in orbit, someone, somewhere, would have seen it. And they would have told everybody.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, well, like I said, I only entertain the notion. Part of me there's two parts, There's the part, like all the stuff you're saying, which is like, clearly this is a crazy idea. But then the other part of me just sort of wishes that it was true. I mean, don't we all kind of wish that they did have a secret space program? Because part of me sort of hates NASA, dude. I hate to be a killjoy here in my guest host spot, but, ever since they stopped going to the moon, it's like they don't do anything anymore. No one's excited about them anymore or anything like that.
Well, no, and the greatest enemy of NASA is that things appear to become routine. And, I see exactly where you're coming from, but at the same time, having worked on the inside, and knowing how difficult, it's really difficult.
Oh, I know.
To keep,
I mean, yeah.
To keep, the International Space Station, flying and manned and work on finishing construction. It's very difficult, let alone, treaties that have to be signed and contracts that have to be signed and all the negotiations, not to mention crew training. And it's a huge mammoth effort. And, the one thing that I said before when I was on Paratopia, which, I think is becoming even more true, is that in the very near future, the private industry, private spacecraft are going to become, the low Earth orbit, the sort of, a Virgin Galaxy thing that's going on, and private industry is going to take over space flight, and in my opinion, and I think that's when you're going to start seeing the secret space program, when it can be outsourced to Boeing or Lockheed, or SAIC.
Oh, yeah.
That's when all of the stuff is going to happen, I think.
Yeah, I think part of my disenfranchisement with NASA is just that I'm only like 30, so I missed the whole moonshot thing, and I just wish they would do more. But like you said, they're doing so much stuff that I probably just take it for granted, like that they actually have a space station and stuff. You know what I mean?
Sure, and it's and I'm not much older, and with the the retirement of the shuttle program, is NASA's, at least on the space flight side of the house right now, is sort of going through a reboot.
Yeah,
and so yeah.
Although I do, I like the Hubble, and I can't wait to see the next phase of the Hubble, and I can't remember what that's called, but it's going to see further. It's going to be able to see planets in other galaxies. That's
the goal.
Yeah, so that's fascinating to me. That almost seems more worthwhile a mission than trying to get men to Mars, don't you think? It's at least accessible.
Well, isn't that the big problem, too, in NASA, this whole robots versus humans sort of factionalization in space, in space exploration? Some people want to use humans and some don't and all that.
Well, the problem is that what you see, the crux of that whole argument is the relationships between the different centers. So JSC at Johnson Space Center in Houston, that's sort of the hub and home of the Mission Operations Directorate, which runs the shuttle program pretty much in the International Space Station program from the American side. And that's, of course, Mission Operations is also the home of the Astronaut Corps. So you're going to see, all of the pundits for JSC pushing for bigger, better, faster, more, more funding, more astronauts, more crew training. And then you'll have your other centers, so this, Ames or Goddard or, I'm not, Marshall maybe, that is more stuff. They get their money by building stuff and bigger and better, faster stuff, not people. And so, in my opinion, that's sort of what you see right there. You see a little infighting going on with that situation.
Now, you've had a little more time, obviously, since the last episode to check out Mars and moon anomaly photos. Is there anything in those at all that you or any of your colleagues have ever said, yeah, that could be something, or is it all just the way these people are shading in surfaces on the photos?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's nothing that I've ever seen on the moon that is anything other than shades or sort of photo anomalies. On the Mars stuff, of course, the face on Mars I think is probably just shades. I don't think it's an actual face, but the thing is that everybody keeps telling me that there are photos of sort of pyramid-like structures, but I've never been able to actually see that. So,
when you say everyone tells you, you mean people in NASA?
No. Well, yeah, some people who work for NASA tell me that there are these photos, but most of it's actually coming from people I talk to on the internet or friends. Mm-hmm. But I've never been able to see them. So I don't know. Everybody tells me that photos exist, but nobody can produce them.
Huh. Well, we'll let it hang there. Let's get into Bulgaria now. What made you decide to check out Bulgaria, and what did you find?
Well, actually, my wife is from Bulgaria. We were, just sort of to refresh everyone, I was the in-country systems administrator for NASA Mir 5, 6, and 7, and did crew training and support for the first 3 crews of the International Space Station. And in that capacity, I was stationed at the United States Embassy in Moscow. And I met and married my wife there, who was a fellow expatriate, and she's from Bulgaria. And so she and I actually have a home there in the city of Varna. And so there's my sort of where my interest begins. But the one thing that I did notice is that, especially in the United States, things that go on abroad, with the exception of Tim's show, Tim is pretty good about talking to UFO researchers in other parts of the world. You know,
thanks, buddy.
I mean, you guys, you've had some real interesting guests on your show from Sweden and different places. So, what I did find though is that there was sort of a huge amount of activity going on over the Balkans, and when we last spoke, you know, there had been a lot of activity going on in sort of the center of the country, and I found it very interesting because a lot of people might not know this, but the United States is currently building 3 military bases in Bulgaria, or they're building I should say joint operations bases, but they're pretty much manned only by Americans. There's a Navy base that's being built actually in Varna. There's an Air Force base that's being built in outside of the town of Veliko Turnovo in the sort of the center of the country. And right outside of Sofia, there's going to be a United States Army base. And as that sort of construction began and you started seeing the beginnings of the United States Black Sea Fleet moving into Port Varna, and you started seeing increased military activity, people, U.S. airplanes flying out of Veliko Turnovo to go to Iraq or Afghanistan, sort of the UFO activity sort of picked up. And that's sort of where we left it last time. But now, you know, I don't know if any of your listeners have been paying attention, but there was a mass UFO sighting in Bulgaria on New Year's Eve, and so outside of Sofia, I think probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people saw it.
Oh wow!
There were also in January there was increased activity actually in the town of Varna, where my wife's family is from and where we have our home. All the way from New Year's Eve, all the way into sort of the middle of the. Just Varna is a big beach town, and it's on the Black Sea coast, and over the Black Sea, off of Varna, and in sort of over to the west of Varna, increased UFO activity throughout January. And then we have the whole Filipov situation, which I'm sure you might want to talk about.
Sure. What is it?
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, one of the story is that one of the associate directors of the Bulgarian Space Research Institute announced to the world that the Bulgarian Space Research Institute was in contact with aliens and that they were among us.
I think I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
recently, yeah.
And then some of the stories about the guy have come out. You know that then he disappeared for 10 days after he said that, and now nobody can get an interview with him and that stuff. So I've sort of been following that and researching that. I got diverted by that. So
I can imagine. Jesus. Well, who was this cat? He just made some announcement and then disappeared?
Well, the story I got from friends of mine in Bulgaria is that apparently there was a press conference which nobody attended.
Sounds like an exopolitics conference. I was kidding.
Well, actually, the interesting thing, if his name is Dr. Filipov. It's spelled Filipov, and if you Google it, all you'll find is sort of the exopolitics websites have picked up on it. The interesting thing is that the story goes that there was a press conference and aliens were present and they answered questions from reporters.
Jesus.
Apparently, now, nobody can find anybody who attended that press conference. Nobody knows when the press conference was exactly. There's a few sort of YouTube videos and stuff of American sort of radio show hosts and podcast hosts doing interviews with this guy. I've never met him. I have met some of the people at the Bulgarian Space Research Institute in my old job in that capacity, but I don't necessarily know what to make of it.
Did the press conference take place? I mean, when you say there's no record of it, it sounds outlandish. Can't we just put those two together?
Yes. I think that's what I think. A lot of people have ran with that story, but I can't prove that it ever happened. And and the thing is that the guy is actually, he is the director for international collaboration with the Space Research Institute. That's what his job is. He's not really a co-director. So, there's more intrigue there than that. With the whole he disappeared thing, and then apparently there was a letter put out to the media from him, written in perfect American English, that sort of people started calling me on that because they said, well, obviously, this is, you automatically jump to the conclusion that this is disinformation or this is some sort of intelligence agency doing something. But to be honest with you, I think it's all just BS. to be perfectly honest with you. And go ahead.
Yeah, well, I do know the story you're talking about now, and I remember seeing it on a forum.
I do too. Yeah, I just looked it up. The cosmetics.
Well, it was the way it was framed was, did disclosure happen already? And then, of course, the story that the media was invited, and everything was disclosed, and for whatever reason they aren't talking about it. And I just thought, well, one of these disclosure people just are covering their own tails because they keep making these predictions on dates that never come to fruition. Now, when you say that there's more intrigue than that, how do you mean? Do you mean that you think that there is some things that happened here? That there is some because I can't quite tell. It sounds like you're saying there's no fire to the smoke, but then on the other hand, you're saying that there's more intrigue. So
there is. I think what the intrigue is so the Bulgarian government is going through a big transition right now. In the November time frame when this was going on, sort of there had been an election, and the old government, which was essentially your typical Eastern European corrupt regime, was ousted by the guy who had been the mayor of Sofia, the capital city there, and he is, by all accounts, sort of kicking ass and taking names at this point. Just today, in fact, the European authorities in Belgium have stepped in and have started assisting him with prosecuting the former government officials. And so when I say intrigue, I think that what I mean to say is that there's more sort of internal politics going on.
So it could have been just this guy kind of trying to cause problems or something?
Or get attention and make money. Because if you're the former head of or supposed co-director of the Bulgarian Space Research Institute that had a press conference with aliens that aliens attended, you could probably make a lot of money talking at exopolitics conferences.
So you think that these
true.
Bulgarian scientists are aware of exopolitics?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Bulgarians are aware. There's an organization called Exopolitics Bulgaria, and they take the stuff pretty seriously. And I disagree with them there just as much as I disagree with them here. The interesting thing, though, I have to say, it's sort of an interesting phenomenon to watch. Is I've never actually been to a full-on UFO conference in the United States. Mm-hmm. I can sort of imagine sort of what it's like, but
Jerry Springer without the chair throwing.
Right, exactly. But the interesting thing, man, is in the Balkans, or even in sort of Turkey or in Russia, it's not uncommon for UFO conferences to draw 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people.
Jesus, we're living in the wrong country, Jeremy.
Well, yeah.
And so, there was not too long ago, there was a UFO conference outside of Istanbul. And I think, from what I was told by my friend who actually went, there was about 2,500 people there.
Jesus.
And that's just the audience. That doesn't count sort of the speakers and all that other thing. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Stanton Friedman spoke at that one. But anyway, this subject is taken pretty seriously in the Balkans, especially since there's just sort of tons of activity that goes on.
Are there UFO groups? Is it like a MUFON of Bulgaria?
There is. It's sort of loosely affiliated by town. They suffer probably even worse than American organizations do for lack of funding. But they do what they can, and I have several friends who dedicate a large portion of their lives to researching and collecting reports and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we had spoken about the possibility of it being sort of a Marley Woods or Skinwalker Ranch portal type situation over there. Do you get the sense of that, or do you think it's something else?
No, there is a. It's interesting enough. It's not too far from where the United States is building its Air Force base in Veliko Turnovo, outside of Veliko Turnovo, which is Veliko Turnovo. For those who don't know, it's a sort of a mountain town. It's a very old town. It's an ancient capital of the old Bulgarian kingdom, and there is a region there which is sort of akin to what I would consider to be the Marley Woods. Strange creature sightings, lots of activities. Cattle mutilations happen, mostly with sheep, and and it's all concentrated in sort of one geographic area.
Interesting. What kind of strange creatures? Like Bigfoot?
They have a version of Bigfoot. It's smaller, has red hair, more reddish tinge to the hair. But they also see things like I've been told that they have seen things that appear to be like really large sheepdogs that are saying sort of about 1.5 meters, which is about maybe 4.5 feet tall at the shoulder. And
Jeez.
I have been told by someone that I spoke with there that there was a guy out hunting and saw one of these things and took a shot at it, was sure he hit it, and it just kept on walking, and after a while just disappeared.
And what about their aliens? Are they the little gray guys? Are they blondes? Are they something completely different?
They're the combination of the grays and the Nordics, but the vast majority of sightings that I've heard about where people actually saw aliens were the Nordic types.
Wonder why that is.
I'm not sure. It's here's the interesting thing about Bulgaria that I want people to keep in mind is Bulgarians are very superstitious people. My mother-in-law is a genetic engineer. She's a brilliant lady. and every year she still goes to a fortune teller. I mean, it's just it's a thing. It's a cultural thing, and I mention this because when people tell you that they've seen things, they automatically attach these meanings to them.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of sort through those things. And it's interesting because in sort of Russia, when I lived there, and I spoke with people who'd actually seen a UFO, or claimed to have seen a UFO, or claimed to have seen aliens, they were always sort of a more robotic type of thing. And they seem to be describing more of like an android thing. But in the case of the Balkans, everybody seems to, that I have spoken with, sort of, either it's the archetypical gray, or it's the Nordic thing, which they automatically, exceptionally tall, long blonde hair, which in the Balkans is, out of place.
And do they do the same sorts of things that we hear in the States?
As far as
abductions go, I mean, is it the stereotypical genetic testing narrative?
Yeah, it is, and there is sort of an overtone of experimentation, and more. There seems to be a lot of my friends that I speak with that collect these stories seem to believe from the accounts that there seems to be more of a collective type experience going on. Many of the reports that they have are, that when they get abducted, they actually see other people there. And in one case, I have a case of there's a little village called Schumann, which is sort of in the eastern part of the country, and the account is that a person was abducted by aliens, was on a ship, or believed that they were on a ship, and saw other people there, and then actually, after the experience, a couple weeks later, actually ran into the person that they saw on the street, who was also from Schumann, and they both sort of remembered the same thing.
Wow. So I've heard stories like that, but I didn't, not specifically from Bulgaria. Now, what is the... Oh, you got some more there you want to go? Or?
Well, no. I mean, I was just saying that's the first time that I've heard of people having that experience and then actually meeting in real life and remembering it together.
That's true, actually, yeah. I've heard of stories where people get abducted and they see other people there, but now that you mention it, I don't know if I've ever heard of them, like, meeting later. Except for that movie, Taken. Happens in Taken. Now, you say the people of Bulgaria are superstitious and stuff. What is their reaction to this whole UFO phenomenon in general? Are they freaked out by it, or are they, what's up?
There's just about in any country you have to separate sort of by age groups and by ethnicities and that sort of thing. So Bulgaria has a large Gypsy or Roma population, and for them, it's sort of demons and it's wicked spells and that kind of thing. For most Bulgarians are very sort of scientific-minded people, and so they're extremely interested in it and follow it. It's crazy to watch Bulgarian TV and see these really prominent scientists, sort of Nobel laureate types, discussing UFOs and stuff over there. It's taken very seriously, and it's a small country, so you have a large concentration of really educated people who just sort of collectively throw the subject under the spotlight.
Well, we definitely are in the wrong country. Jeez.
Yeah, for sure. We need to get us an estate in Bulgaria. Now, now if they take it this seriously and everything, then how did they react when this dude went out and said he had a press conference and the aliens and all that? That must have been like headline news, right, in Bulgaria?
It was headline news in Bulgaria, and everybody thought he was crazy. Huh. Nobody sort of believed it, and no one thought that I was. First of all, the guy basically comes out of nowhere with this just exclamation to the international press. And so everybody thought it was just a sort of a money-making scheme.
Well, yeah, wouldn't the press that's reporting on him, saying that he's crazy, know whether or not they were invited to a press conference?
You would think. And the interesting thing is the guy is sort of, for me, the telltale signs of what's going on is the guy is getting tons of press from the international. He's getting tons of media coverage from the international press. He's not getting anything at all inside of Bulgaria. Mm-hmm. He's sort of ignored, and so I think for me that's in a country as enamored with the subject as that is. Then I think that
yeah,
that
they're like embarrassed almost. They're like,
exactly.
Oh, this kooky dude is now. Everyone thinks all Bulgarians are crazy.
Exactly.
Do the Bulgarians make the connection between the U.S. military bases and the rise in UFO sightings?
Absolutely. All my friends are sort of watching just before, let's see, I want to say the first week of December, sort of the first members of what is going to become the United States Black Sea Fleet arrived at Port Varna, and almost immediately followed by the sort of increased activity. So, it's not a big jump, and it's not a huge leap to think that, well, the ships have showed up and now look. And so that's a lot of people think it's now there are of course the guys that I know that actually record reports are sort of getting just hammered with reports. But now there's a guy who lives in a little town called Stara Zagora, who's actually a trained military spotter, who has volunteered his services, and he's been able to start analyzing video and photos and say, oh no, it's that aircraft or that aircraft. So, he's slowly working his way through those. And with our activity in Afghanistan increasing now, Bulgaria is sort of, for the U.S. military, like a lot of the Balkan countries, is sort of flyover territory to get to Afghanistan from Germany or Italy. And so you're starting to see a lot of, stealth aircraft and that kind of thing in the skies.
Mm-hmm. And so is this something, do you think that it'll get to the point where the U.S. military will have to make a statement at some point and say, we're not dealing with blondes, this is the stealth, nothing to see here?
The United States ambassador has already made a statement and said, well, first of all, and I kind of don't understand, to be perfectly honest with you, what's going on, but he made a statement early or sort of late last year where he came out and he said, the United States is not building military bases in Bulgaria. We're building joint operations bases in Bulgaria. So he's playing with semantics. And he's made several statements about that sort of topic in the press. And then he has addressed UFO sightings and said that, that they were simply United States aircraft flying over. And then with the whole situation that was, the thing in Norway that happened, that sort of ignited the flames of reporting in Bulgaria again, and now people have started to claim to see the same things. But I can't over Bulgaria, but I can't verify any of that information.
Mm-hmm.
I find it kind of interesting that you say they take it wicked seriously there. And you contrast that with America, where they really don't take it too seriously. And at the end of the day, they're not any closer than we are figuring all this UFO stuff out. So it kind of like, in a cynical sort of way, it's like, well, shit, no matter what you do, you're not going to get to the bottom of this, whether you take it super seriously and really study this or completely dismiss it and marginalize it like what happens in America. It's like this thing's truly enigmatic.
Well, yeah, and to me, Bulgaria is a good case study for me. It's a microcosm of what's happening in the United States, and you're exactly right, Tim. If they can't figure it out, or and not just Russia, for Christ's sake. It's the largest country on Earth, and it has more geography than than you think you could fit 3 or 4 of us of the United States is within the Russian Federation, and if not more. And they have more UFO sightings and reports than we've ever thought about, and the Russians can't figure it out. So it just tells me that and having worked within the space program, it just confirms with me that there is no agency anywhere who's hiding information about UFOs. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't exist.
Do you think at this point there's just this unspoken thing between countries that there's this thing called UFOs, we don't know what it is, let's just pretend that it doesn't exist and go on? I mean, do you get the sense that anyone even talks about it internationally? Or
officially, I would say nobody talks about it. In an official capacity, there aren't summits about the UFO subject.
I mean, to me, it would be like fish not talking about the boats. It's like we don't know what the boats are, so we're just not going to ever talk about them. We're just going to agree to keep silent.
I'll let out one of the secrets on your show. You have a sort of a Paratopia exclusive here. If you really want to know sort of what's going on and where the officials meet unofficially and talk amongst themselves in an unofficial capacity, and it's one of those things where sort of what happens in the room stays in the room, and where all of the unofficial negotiations happen it's the Paris Air Show. It happens once a year. It's the largest air show on the planet, and every aerospace and space agency that exists is there. And if it's discussed at all, I would believe it would be discussed at the Paris Air Show.
Wow, interesting.
I just want to get back to Bulgaria for one sec here and ask, do they have a sense, the way we do, a chronology of Roswell, and that happened, and that, or Foo Fighters happened, and that sort of started the modern age of UFOs? Or do they see this as having always been with us? What's sort of the typical start date for them of this stuff?
Well, I mentioned in my first appearance on your show that there are actual sort of tomb paintings and cave paintings depicting what appear to be UFOs in Bulgaria. So the sense that I get is that they believe that this has been around forever, and as long as sort of we've been around and looking up, it's been there. And now the modern age of sort of UFO studies for them sort of begins with after sort of the post World War II era and the rebuild that happened because especially the western part of the country was severely bombed by the Allies in World War II because it was occupied by Germans pretty much at the time. And so there was a large wave of UFO sightings that happened sort of in the 46, 47, 48 time frame. And for Bulgarians, that marks the beginning of Bulgarian ufology. Of when they actually started sort of taking notes and taking reports and, And
do they see it as leading toward anything, building up toward something?
Well, again, just like in any country, there is the exopolitics crowd, which pretty much anybody that I consider to be a friend of mine doesn't associate with, but because they're if in America they're out there, in the Balkans they're really out there, and they had some guy I think who was actually at the Exopolitics Spain conference recently in Bulgaria speaking, who claimed that a secret it was the secret American Space Force took him to Mars and he
I saw that.
He walked on the planet without any type of spacesuit, and that everything we've been told is wrong. And so there is that crowd in Bulgaria, just like there is anywhere else, I guess. And I guess outlandish stories like that draw crowds anywhere. But the biggest sense that I get is that it's just a mystery that people are researching and have actively interested in, but aren't sure that they'll ever come up with an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's the government have to say over there in Bulgaria? Are they kind of mum on this whole thing, or do they sort of,
Well,
I presume they're being pestered by the exopolitical people to say something, right?
Well, they are. There's Bulgaria has had 2 astronauts in the past, one of whom is Alexander Alexandrov, and Alexander Alexandrov is actively asking the Bulgarian government to disclose any information that it has, like the UK government has, or various other European governments. And I have actually met the guy in Sofia that sort of takes the what is the equivalent of the Freedom of Information Act requests over there, and if there is anything to disclose, I'm pretty sure that guy would have done it by now, because he's really sick and tired of answering those things.
Yeah. Well, if anything, I bet the Bulgarian government and military and stuff are probably kind of out of the loop on a lot of this.
They're completely out of the loop.
Yeah.
Would you say that living in a country over which we fly to Afghanistan would make the citizens more aware of the difference between top technology and something anomalous, or no?
Definitely more, especially now that some flights are actually landing. There's a lot more air activity. Essentially what has happened is some of the Air Force stuff, that assets that were stationed in Germany, have been relocated to Bulgaria. So I guess so that they're sort of closer to the action and sort of more of a rapid response type of thing. And so I've seen it myself. The last I was in country, you can see obvious F-16s flying, especially in the mountain regions, just like they do here, flying low. People have learned to identify what type of aircraft it is and whether it's ours or not, and more aware, definitely.
Are people seeing rounded UFO craft, or are they seeing triangles, or what's the basic shape?
Most are either diamond shaped or triangles.
Which again could sound like our own technology, no?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I want to, I think, I still believe that there's something weird going on, and I still think that UFO sightings are happening, and there are things, there are people that I have, since we last spoke, one of the guys that, he was my best man at our wedding, he's actually seen a UFO, and he's one of the smartest guys that I know, and if he can't explain it, and he saw it up close for over several minutes. If he saw it, then he saw it. If he says he saw it, I would never doubt this guy.
Now, you train these cosmonauts to be in the ISS?
Yeah. Well, my job was I was essentially doing. I was working with Russian, American astronauts, Russian cosmonauts. I also worked with a few other sort of French and Japanese, and there's a Korean guy and some Canadians. And what we did, my job function was primarily communication support for the program. But as far as training goes, my job was information technology training and sort of how to repair things on orbit and that type of thing.
Oh, that would be terrifying if something broke while you were in space. And I heard a story once, maybe you've heard this, and I think it was Paul Stonehill that told the story about the Russian cosmonauts up there in the space station, sometimes how they're in there for like a year or something like that, and
right.
They end up hearing voices or something like that. That was a really rough version of the stories, but maybe you've heard it before.
No, absolutely. In fact, the cosmonaut you're talking about, well, there are several Russian cosmonauts who have spent a year in space at a time. But one in particular you're talking about is a cosmonaut named Valery Korzun, who sort of got what the Russians call cabin. What it translates to is essentially cabin fever, and or they call it capsule fever. And he had started hearing voices, and his adjustment back to being on Earth was extremely rough, I understand.
Jesus. So this was more like he kind of went a little crazy. It wasn't like they were... Well, I guess we will never really know, will we? If the voices that he heard were real or not, right? I mean, when you're up there in space, anything's possible, baby. That's my attitude, So, I mean, if I was stuck in a little capsule for like a year, if I started hearing voices, I'd probably believe it too, but I don't know.
Sure. Well, it's a very stressful situation.
But he's up there with other people, right? I mean, they didn't hear the voices.
They didn't hear the voices, right? Yeah, he was up there at that time. He was up there with one other person.
I'd like to be that other dude.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
the equipment didn't snap, but my co-pilot did.
It's like, listen, I'm just going to hang out in my bunker for a while, man.
Pretty much, pass the vodka. That's pretty much how it goes. But the thing is about in that job, you can't really overstate the effect that stress has on a person. And I like just imagine you get up in the morning, you get up on Monday morning, you go to work, and you're not getting off work for a year.
Yeah, it's like prison. I bet it's almost like prison in a sense.
It is.
You can't
absolutely.
leave. You can't go outside or anything. It's like that would drive you crazy. I bet.
That's why the number one function of ground support people is crew support, psychological support. Number one function.
You're the best man at your wedding, your friend. You said that he had a sighting for over an hour. What
Absolutely.
Was this close up? Was this far? Did the thing land? I mean, what was the nature of this?
He was camping, and his name is Stanko. Stanko was camping, and he near the city of Burgas, which is sort of in southeastern Bulgaria, again on the Black Sea coast. And he saw a diamond-shaped object. The way he described it to me is it could have been anywhere from a mile to 2 miles away, sort of just above the trees. And he described it as big as if he put his thumb out, he couldn't cover it with his thumb at that distance. And he saw it, and it sort of hovered and flew away, then came back and finally disappeared over the Black Sea.
No camera, eh?
Yeah, no, camera's present, and pictures were taken.
Oh, really? Do you have have you seen photos of it?
I have seen photos of it.
Is this something that we can put on the website?
I can certainly, I can send you a digital picture, it's no problem.
All right, cool.
Interesting. Nice.
Another exclusive. So tell us, you now have gotten your own podcast underway.
Yeah, I heard you're trying to put me and Jeremy out of business.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
It was a spur of the moment thing, inspired by you guys, and what we wanted to do. The name of the podcast is The Black Fridays, and what we want to do is explore UFOs from the ground up. So walking into it knowing essentially absolutely nothing. So, some of the people that you speak with are sort of just walking encyclopedias, and can name dates and times and sprout the people who are involved off the top of their head. And so we wanted to come in and say, okay, we know absolutely nothing about the phenomena. For real. Besides what we're learning about. So let's start from scratch. And so we started speaking with different people in the field, and have talked to people such as Stan Friedman. We talked to Richard Dolan, and which is a really interesting guy, and trying to explore this subject without any preconceived notions, but also, and I know I might take a little heat for this, but my background, my educational background actually is I'm an engineer, but my minor was in anthropology, and specifically biblical anthropology. And so it's always interested me the fact that from a sort of a cultural anthropology / sociology standpoint, that it's an interesting thing to me that people are more than willing to believe that aliens are coming from other planets and visiting Earth, and all of these things are going on, but they're not willing to believe, not willing to even postulate the idea that this may be something. I don't want to say demonic, but something other than that.
Something closer.
Some kind of deception.
Right. And even with, what you guys have explored on Paratopia with George Hansen and the Trickster, and, I know Tim has covered this subject, and other shows have covered that subject, but nobody is ever willing to say Trickster equals, the only person I've ever heard sort of talk about that is actually Jeff on, when he's talked about early things that he believed early on when he had his
Yeah, that's always bugged me too. That's what bothers me about actually George Hansen stuff is like, yeah, we're all tiptoeing around saying devil, demon, or that sort of thing. But isn't that? When you say a force that can pretend to be anything to cause us harm or just be malicious for malicious sake, what else are we talking about? Q from Star Trek? It's like
exactly.
These are our options, right?
Exactly, and the thing is that we're not trying to push any sort of religious beliefs off in anybody, and now my co-host Stacy is a sort of a seminary student on hiatus right now, so he definitely has his preconceived notions about things, but what we do is, for everything that we've heard on paranormal radio, religion is the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. And so we have said, okay, we're going to go there and let's explore this. And so we've had some really interesting conversations, and we're not just limiting ourselves to the paranormal topics. We've covered some really interesting sort of deep history and I don't know, is parahistory a word? But we've covered that kind of thing, and we've had a really interesting response. So,
well, I think it's a great way to go. Definitely start from scratch. And I do think, contrary to a lot of the stuff that I post on our forums, I smack people around a little bit for getting too religious sometimes because I just don't want it to turn into proselytizing and that sort of thing. And then I also go on some of these forums, and I see people, when they mention religion, it's like, it's just all biblical quotes, or it's all just angel demon stuff. It's all very, just basic, uncomplicated mythology for the masses stuff that doesn't appeal to me. But not just Christianity, but pretty much every religion that I can think of that I've read up on, they do have, the deeper you go, they do have interesting things to say that do apply here, I think, or at least are worthy of examination, that are not shallow, sort of wish fulfillment aspects of the religion, but clearly people who have delved deeply into consciousness and found some things there that might not have been them. Let's put it that way.
And we're not limiting ourselves to the Christian faith or any sort of Protestant faith. We're in talks right now. We've been talking for a while with a guy who's actually he's a Muslim cleric, and he's been answering our questions, which we're just constantly bugging him with. But he hasn't agreed to come on the show yet. But we're working on him, and we're talked with sort of a Hindi priest, a Sikh. Mm-hmm. And a priest, and we've talked to a Buddhist guy, a Buddhist monk who is going to come on the show, I think, and talk to us about sort of the Buddhist perception of the trickster and how it manifests in our world. And so That's what we're trying to explore.
Well, interesting.
Yeah.
Just talk to an Amish guy. Be interested in what they have to say.
They sell vegetables in Union Square. I could just go down there and grab them.
And fake fireplaces, I think.
Oh, nice.
Who's this? Amish?
Yeah, they do the farmers market every weekend.
I didn't know they were that close to New York City.
Yeah, I guess where were they? Upstate New York and Pennsylvania, I think, right?
Don't tell me to take the subway.
No, horse and buggy only.
Okay. Good.
So give people your website so they know where to find your podcast.
Sure, it's www.theblackfridays.net.
Excellent.
And we're available on iTunes and all that good stuff. And disinfo.com, we're available there too.
Cool. Anything else, Tim?
Just to follow up on just what you were saying about these religious folks that you talked to, I didn't mean to be smarmy by mentioning the Amish thing. I was sort of making a joke, but I am interested in. You say you've talked to them. Just generally, what's their attitude about UFOs, UFO phenomenon, and trickster stuff? Because all I've ever heard really is the American Christian Catholic sort of perspective. I don't even know of too many other religions that have spoken out about it, except you could probably tie in the jinn thing with the Muslims.
Well, the interesting thing to me so far has been, talking with the Muslim guy. And I'm going to probably take a lot of heat for this because I'm probably going to slaughter this. But my understanding is that essentially the Muslim faith believes that there are three orders of creation. There's the first order of creation, which is sort of the earth and the universe, and there's a second order of creation, which is animals and people. And then there's a third order. And that third order is sort of jinns and angels and demons and all this other stuff. And so in the third order, there are entities which require or use some sort of transportation to move about. And they, as I understand it, this is what they account UFOs, It was an interesting talk we had. We were, has anybody ever seen a UFO in Afghanistan or in Saudi Arabia, and what did they think it was? The answer I was given was simply, it's something, it was this type of jinn or something which requires conveyance. And the Buddhist thing, the interesting thing about, and Jeremy actually may know more about this than I do, but the Buddhist guy is extremely reluctant to really go into it. And it's like, he's saying essentially, we have this stuff and I could tell you about it, but I'm not. And because I'm not, I just don't want to talk about it because, I'll bring, I guess, bad karma or something to me. And I don't necessarily understand. Now, the Hindi guy, the Sikh we were talking with, just has had UFO sighting himself in India, and he sort of had that duality going on of this is, physically there was something there. I saw it, so sort of my mind starts working scientifically. What was it? This type of thing. But on the other hand, he was saying, "Oh, this is the possibility of sort of bad spirits was there as well." So it's interesting stuff.
Huh, yeah.
Well, with all the telescopes aimed out into space now and satellites, does it seem likely to you that if these were aliens, we would be seeing them, and then the fact that we're not means that they're here, that they're under the atmosphere?
Well, that's just it, isn't it? Because now it's not just the United States government or governments of the world that are operating these satellites or these telescopes. There are plenty of private entities that are running these things that have established presences in low Earth orbit. And, if the government, if something was seen or if something was recorded, there would have been no reason for them not to have announced it. In fact, I mean, let's just apply a little common sense to it. If I was running a constellation of telescopes and I saw a UFO, I could make a hell of a lot of money pretty quickly by announcing everything to the press and offering tour guides or something, offer guided tours or something of my facility, and all the press I would get. It would be wonderful marketing. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that if there was anything coming from outside of our atmosphere to coming to the planet, I think we would know about it. And it's just not happening. So the idea is either, yes, they are here, which I had a very interesting talk. You and I and Tim were speaking before we started recording about the health situation with my nephew, and I actually had a really interesting talk with one of the doctors who was working with my nephew, trying to figure out what was wrong with him, and he was telling me that he said, if you think that the Earth is really unexplored, and he said, and it is, and the ocean, let alone the ocean, he said, the human brain is a complete mystery in reality. I mean, and that guy was a neurologist. So,
can we have him on the show?
Absolutely. I have a neurologist I've been working with, trying to discover what's going on with you. And so, his name is...
He's not joking, folks, either. That's the scary part.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I'm actually having dinner with him either this Friday or next Friday, and I'll ask him if he'll come on the show before he moves. But very fascinating guy. And we've had some really interesting discussions about Mr. Vaeni.
I just like the idea that you guys are having dinners and stuff and talking about Jeremy unbeknownst to him.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, the only question that's never been answered is how thick is Jeremy's skull? We've got to know this.
Oh, I am a white guy. How thick is my? How would I know that?
Can you measure that?
Yeah, it has to be measured. And the reason why is the whole video of Jeremy doing his moves with while hooked to an EEG, that shows that pretty much you're in REM, or you're in deep sleep or deep rest. The thickness of the skull will affect EEG readings. And so there are people, apparently, that EEGs just don't work on because their skull is actually too thick.
Well, I'm kind of thick-headed, so...
Yeah, exactly.
Probably me.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's good to know you're talking to a neurologist about me, and I haven't been locked up yet. So that's that's good news. Yeah, well, we would love to have a neurologist on the show, and I'd love to talk with him. But I would suggest, just in terms of my stuff, like I said, I started reading this book called Kundalini Awakening, and it's a whole bunch of essays from various people, from psychologists to philosophers to whoever who know about Kundalini, and a lot of, not all, but a lot of what they mention in there is the stuff that happens with me, and it completely all makes sense. Now, I think that I have experienced something that I haven't finished the book yet, but that I have not read in there yet, with this Kundalini thing, that makes me think that even the people who have this Kundalini activated think that that's enlightenment, and it's not. That it's really like phase one, which is bringing the body, etc., if you want to say soul, body, soul, mental, spiritual, to health for the next thing that happens. But in any event, that's another show for another time. But I would just say, Google search that if you've never heard of Kundalini, or Kriyas, which are the spontaneous movements, which is KR, I think IYAS or something like that. I think that's the way it's spelled. So it's all out there. It's all out there in Hindu and Buddhist literature. It's just, it's all out there in Sanskrit, I guess, is the problem.
And the Buddhist guy won't tell us anything.
Yeah, and he ain't talking, so. Well, thank you again, sir, for coming on the show and sharing another fascinating episode of this. I don't think we probably asked you on the last show. I don't think we did here, but just in closing, probably give us what we should have opened with, which is what attracts you to this stuff in the first place?
Oh, I've been following this for since, like I said in Paratopia before, I was really paying attention to this and wasn't even aware that there was such a large group of people out there studying this until I actually had the opportunity to work in the space program. And now I guess I've been sort of bitten by the bug and as trying to figure out sort of what's going on just like everybody else, but trying to apply a little bit of reason and what I know from, having actually worked in a real space program, what it takes to put something in orbit and just trying to find out what's going on just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got to tip my hat to you. I do like what you're saying about your show and just sort of bringing it back with a fresh perspective sort of idea, because that's kind of what I've been advocating for a while as the way to present the UFO phenomenon to the public is say, let's start from scratch here and take a fresh look at this. So I like that you're doing that.
Well, I appreciate it. And like I said, we're both big fans of Paratopia, and we're both big fans of Binnall of America. So it's been a real pleasure for me to speak with you guys tonight.
This is Stanton Friedman, and you're listening to Paratopia.
Tim Binnall. So
what's going on?
How was this for you? Okay.
Oh Jesus! You sounds like after my first night in prison. No, dude, I had a great time. I kind of just, like I was saying, off the air after we had first taped the interview or whatever. Well, I'll just say it this way. I just tried to stay out of the way kind of at first because I'm not used to guest co-hosting, so it's sort of like I'm always afraid of like talking over people and stuff. Mm-hmm. This happens a lot when we do the Lost Cast because we're all so excited about
right.
the smoke monster or something, and then we all sort of chime in at the same time. So I sort of tried to stay out of the way, but I found it very interesting, especially the whole Bulgaria thing. You just don't hear much about that part of the world and what's going on with their UFO scene, and not surprised to hear there's an exopolitics group because they've spread all over the globe. So I found that kind of not surprising, but interesting in a sense that you just sort of like tick that off the list where it's like, geez, Bulgaria too, wow. But no, I had a good time. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me as the guest co-host.
Cool. Yeah, well, definitely thanks for doing it. And I thought you were great. I thought Wes was great. I don't know, it was a good conversation.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. And it's cool that he has so much experience in the real space program and can sort of speak to that, but he has an interest in the UFO phenomenon too, which is refreshing.
Yeah.
Because you usually talk to people that like work for NASA and they probably don't want to even, if they tell you anything, you'll be like off the record.
Well, this is what he said on our last show, was that when he was at NASA, people listened to Coast pretty much religiously. So
that doesn't surprise me, yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I'd be interested to see, kind of like what I said to him, though, about the secret space program and everything. I just think that, like, if anybody in NASA knows anything about UFOs, it's probably, like, only a handful of people. At least that's what I figure. So
yeah, I guess the point I remember making on the last show, which I kind of stand by, is that there's a finite amount of brilliant scientists in the world, and they would have had to have talked to each other, in this country. I just think that eventually somebody from Skunk Works or Area 51 or whatever, unless they're being kept under such lock and key that they never see the light of day, they would have eventually said something to somebody that would have leaked out.
Yeah, that's true. But then where does it get leaked out to? Us? And the paranormal media? It's like it never gets any further than that.
Well, scientific community, I don't know. It seems like it's, I guess I'm stuck in sort of a being stupid. Like, I'm just now defeating my own thing. Because what I've been saying sort of is that it's impossible to keep a technology like that under wraps, but I guess, other countries can't even get the nuclear bomb right. So perhaps.
Oh, like a secret, like anti-gravity technology or something like that.
Yeah, somebody else would have invented it by now. Somebody else just randomly, some genius out there would have figured it out.
I heard they buy that shit from people that figure it out and then don't ever develop it. But I think that might also be like some esoteric urban legend.
Well, there is. I mean, there's definitely corporations that buy things like that. I mean, that's the electric car. I remember there being a washing machine that worked with sound waves instead of water, and that was bought up. So yeah, there are these things that it's not too far fetched to think that happens.
Have you been watching the Olympics?
I've been trying to watch the Olympics, but for like the last 3 days, it's been all curling, and I would rather pull out my pubic hair with a fork, I think, than...
Wow. See, we're like polar opposites here.
You're a curling fan?
I've fallen in love with curling, yes.
Really?
I'm not even joking. I've really been enjoying it quite a bit.
Roomba on ice with a couple of windshield scrapers and a shuffleboard. That's what curling is to me.
It's very involving. It's sort of like, it's a lot like baseball. It's very slow. It's very deliberate. You wait around for a long time for something to happen that happens like really quickly. It's like you wait and wait and wait for this rock to get down to the end, and then it's like ping, pang, pong, bounces off a bunch of things, and it's like, whoa, did you see the way he bounced that rock off that other rock, and then it twisted this other, so it's kind of neat like that. But it's
like
very...
like a caveman sport?
Kind of, yes. And you can kind of tell that the people who've been covering it are starting to slowly go insane. We were talking about this actually on my forum. Because they also show it at like 3 a.m. And the guy who they show it all day, as you've said. And it ends like at 11 at night, and then it picks up again at like 3 in the morning. And every time when the guy closes it out at 11 at night, he's getting a little bit crazier every time. Where like a couple nights ago, he was just like, it's like for those people that can't get enough curling, put on a pot of coffee. Because 3 a.m. curling starts in 2 hours.
Explain to me why it's the only event that's on my television. Aren't there myriad events going on at the Winter Olympics? When did curling become the thing that gets all the TV coverage? It's
gotten an inordinate amount of coverage, it seems. But the women who curl, at least every team has at least one really sexy girl or woman that is curling. So that kind of adds to the intrigue of it.
Yeah, that's just not enough for me.
Oh, yeah, it's very dry.
I mean, if you want the hot women, go to the figure skating. That's
true. But there's just some... I don't like the figure skating that much. I don't like most of the other events, actually. I did like the girl that wiped out, because I have like a fatwa against her. The one that... She's like a snowboarder, and she was like leading last Olympics and was going to win the gold, and then she did some kind of like trick move to like show how cool she was and wiped out and got the silver. And they were like, she's looking for redemption this time around. And then she like wiped out, and I was like, good, fuck her. So, yeah. Plus, it's a lot of jingoism, kind of rubs me the wrong way, the Olympics. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of like rah-rah America, which is,
Yeah.
I can get behind that a little bit, but then when it's like, we have 3,500 medals, and Germany has 3. And it's like, yeah, dude, because we don't have anything else but sports in America anymore. It's like, that's our only industry that's left, that and entertainment. It's like, that's the only thing we export is sports and entertainment. So obviously we're going to do well at that. If they had some kind of math or spelling competition, we probably fucking wouldn't even get on the podium. So,
You're depressing me, Tim. Tim Binnall, everybody.
Oh, shit. Well, that's just my take on the Olympics. I figured we needed some pop culture discussion here at the end.
Job well done. Well played, sir. All right. Anything else before we close out?
Nah, I don't think so. I think we're cool.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you, Jeff,
for allowing it.
And for
making it happen, and hopefully he's back soon. And, like I told all the great Paratopia listeners out there, it can only go up from here. So, Jer, wake up.
What?
Wake up.
Jeff, what are you doing here? Is it 2 months over?
There never was a 2 months. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? I just did a show with Tim Binnall and Wes Owsley.
Wes Owsley? Did we already interview that guy?
Yeah, but you took 2 months off, and then Tim Binnall stepped in, and... Wait a minute. Have I been sitting here at this podcast console the whole time asleep?
Yeah.
What time is it?
It's like 3 a.m.
Jesus. Oh, well. All right, you want to get started on a show, or...
I'm a little tired, actually.
I think that's ironic.